English as spelled is hugely complex because we're trying to match up the sounds with symbols. Well, English has 44 to 47 phonemes. As experts, we cannot even agree on how many phonemes there are in the English language. And when you look at things like the International Phonetic Alphabet, and you look at all of these websites and stuff, sometimes they'll have as many as 4 recordings for the same phoneme. And each one of those recordings makes the sound a little bit different. And phonemes are very tricky. They are not discrete. They will change. Those little sounds that we use, like the short E sound, will change based on what's before and what's after. So acting like these phonemes are all set and simple, and if you just learn these, you'll get it. First of all, that's kind of a problem. The second problem is that we only have 26 letters in the alphabet to represent those 44 to 47 sounds. And so right there, you can kind of see that there's a little bit of a problem. And that actually wouldn't be a problem if we would just have 44 to 47 combinations to represent that sound. But if you think about a couple examples like the sound sh, we use SH, we use that combination to represent it, but we also use CI, CE, SI, CI, TI, TEs, and I'm sure that there are SH and CH. So we actually have all of these different ways to represent the sh sound. So that's kind of what's happened in English because of all of the different variabilities, different influences of language, and also just inconsistencies in spelling in the past couple hundred years. So that's another issue. So on top of not really having this clean way to match up our symbols with our phonemes, which would make up phonics, we also kind of pretend that phonics are really simple and there's only about 60. But what we know is that in English, there are actually about 1,100 different spelling patterns that we can use to represent the 44 to 47 phonemes. And of course, there's, I'm sure we could debate some of those, but the number doesn't get much, no matter how you count it, it doesn't get much lower than 1,000. And so we have all of these different ways to spell all of the different variabilities of the sound, and we act like it should be simple. And here's what I like to tell kids when they say, this is so hard. I never, ever say it's easy. I tell them, you're right. There are actually 6 different ways to say the letter A. And typically in schools, we only teach 2 to 3 of them. A lot of people don't even know that schwa spelling of the A sound. And schwas in and of themselves aren't very consistent. So that's another thing. There are actually 37 different ways to spell the long A sound, but we act like there's only a few. Now, if we only learn a few, that kind of sets us up for not having that knowledge later when it might be helpful, but we actually don't have to learn all 37 ways. What we have found is if we learn about the 8 most common spellings for the long A, we can decode most of the English language. But it is very helpful to kind of prepare our learners for the idea that there's nothing easy about English. So to sum that up, 44 to 47 phonemes, only 26 letters, about 1,100 different orthographic patterns that correspond with those sounds or phonics. And we only teach at most about 60 in school, but we probably need a deep familiarity or recognition of about 500 of them. Not necessarily 500, but that exposure to the most common would be very helpful. So here's what we need to kind of communicate and be really honest about with our learners instead of telling them to try harder. And what I would prefer that we say is that English is really hard and that there are 44 to 47 phonemes. We can't agree on them, only 26 letters. We only usually teach at most about 60 phonic patterns, but it'd be really, really helpful if we knew and were able to recognize very quickly 400 to 500 of them. We don't have to know all 1,100, but it's really helpful if if we are able to recognize them. Ashley, one of the things that we have talked about is why would a kid go through an intensive dyslexia remediation program if they're already reading using compensatory reading? And, I have all the facts and everything about the literature, but tell me a little bit about what it looks like as a specialist working with these kids.
Okay. Well, of course, we have already spoken to the idea that essentially it's not really reading. So you do get to a point where you are going to run across words that you don't know. And then if you don't have an intensive program, you're not explicitly taught these reading patterns. And I'd say this goes along for everybody. This is not just the dyslexic reader, but everyone actually needs to be explicitly taught how to read these patterns.